on the investigations into the alleged existence of organized drug trafficking networks operating within the Coast and Nyanza regions and the extent of their operations. Number 3, the steps being taken to monitor and prevent the use of public transport vehicles as conduits for trafficking narcotic drugs across the country, including collaboration arrangements, if any, with the Ministry of Roads and Transport on provision of sniffer dogs in public transport terminal stations to detect illegal drugs and substances. Number 4, Madam Speaker, is the measures being taken to put in place and to safeguard children using public transport from exposure to narcotic drug trafficking and abuse. And finally, Madam Speaker, long-term measures being implemented to combat the proliferation and distribution of narcotic drugs, particularly among the youth. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and with your permission, I want to acknowledge yesterday, Madam Speaker, that you kindly recognized the presence of Nyakiore High School, a school from my constituency, when Madam Honorable Jerusha and I were out. I truly want to thank you and ex post facto congratulate the children and wish them all the best in their studies to become, Madam Speaker, like you, or members of Parliament like us. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Next we have I think the statement by Honorable Muchela is not available. Member from Vita is delayed. We'll give him a chance next time. He sought permission. So next we can go Honorable Member for Awendo, Walter Owino. Oh, yes. Now, apologies. Yes, yours is marked to the Committee on Administration and Internal Security. And I think Honorable Raso is here. He can give an undertaking on behalf of the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what Honorable colleague has raised is really seismic and it's really very important. And I think as a committee, we are trying to do a lot on the side of drugs. And Nakada is appearing before us tomorrow. And we hope to take up his statement. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we'll respond comprehensively to the House in 2 weeks.
Yes, Honorable.
I will be begging that the chair invites me for the session that Nakada will be attending, so that I can also represent the people who made me ask this question. I beg.
Okay.
Most obliged, Madam Speaker. We'll get in touch with the Honorable colleague.
All right, thank you. The Honorable Member for Awendo, Honorable Walter Owino, is he in the House? If he's not in the House, I think there was a response for him from the Agriculture and Livestock Committee. I can't see the chairperson, but the vice chair is here. Is the vice chair or any member of the committee? Okay, so I think since he's not here to table it, we'll just proceed. We can defer it to a later date. Okay, we can move to the next order.
Order number 8, the Basic Education Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 3 of 2025, second reading.
Honorable Oluoch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move the Basic Education Amendment, I rise to move the Basic Education Amendment Bill, Amendment Bill of 2025. Madam Speaker.
I think read it in full for the record.
Okay.
As appears on the order paper.
On the order paper. Okay. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Basic Education Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 3 of 2025, be read a second time. Madam Speaker, the Basic Education Amendment Bill, at its definition part, defines basic education to include public and private schools. The purpose of this bill is to align the Basic Education Amendment, the Basic Education Act with the Constitution, and the following provisions of the Constitution are instructive, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at Article 10 of the Constitution, Article 10 2B, provides that the national values and principles of governance would include, among other things, human dignity, equality, social justice, inclusiveness, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of marginalized persons. Madam Speaker, Article 27 of the Constitution, and I'm still laying the basis in terms of why this amendment seeks to align to the Constitution. Article 27(2) provides that every person is equal before the law, has the right of equal protection and equal benefits of the law. At Part 2, it says equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and fundamental freedoms. Further, at sub-article 6, it provides that to give full effect to the realization of the rights guaranteed under this article, the state shall take legislative and other measures, including affirmative action programs and policies designed to redress any disadvantage suffered by individuals or groups because of past discrimination. And this will become instructive when I go to the second part to which this bill seeks to align. The second last part is Article 43 of the Constitution, sub-article 1F, which provides that every person has a right to, and Part F talks about education. And lastly, in terms of aligning to the Constitution, Article 53 talks about the rights of every child to free and compulsory basic education. Madam Speaker, there exists an update policy 2009, which the Ministry of Education, after very, very extensive stakeholder engagement, including engagement with alternative provision for basic education update stakeholders, came up with a policy in which the category of schools known as alternative provisions for basic education and training was entrenched and sought to have been entrenched by way of a policy. This policy remains at a policy level and has never been mainstreamed into the Basic Education Act. In terms of mainstreaming also, or aligning the Basic Education Act, Madam Speaker, I wish to draw the attention of this House to legal notice number 39. Legal notice number 39 are the Basic Education Regulations 2015, which continue to operate, and it is dated the 8th of April 2015. Madam Speaker, at Part 4 of this regulation of this legal notice, provision is made of the alternative provisions for basic education and training and continuing education. Madam Speaker, if you read between Regulation 68 that talks about institutions of alternative basic education and continuing adult education, provision is made there about how to utilize and share facilities for adult education and all other aspects that are involved in the UPBET institution. It talks about grants at Regulation 69. It talks about curriculum at paragraph 70, And Madam Speaker, then it is instructive to note that APET institutions are regulated by curriculum drawn by the curriculum that is run under the Ministry of Education that both public and private schools operate under. At Regulation 79, it talks about learners above the age of 18 years. And at Regulation 72, it talks about placement. This goes on and on up to Regulation 78, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this amendment also seeks to align, in terms of our Constitution, the basic education to UN conventions and treaties to which Kenya is a party. Madam Speaker, when we appeared before the two committees, the Committee of Education and then the Committee on Budget and Appropriations Committee, the stakeholder engagement was extensive. The Budget and Appropriations Committee came up with an analysis in which, in this analysis, it carried out certain statistics. And before I take us through these statistics, it is important that I also lay these facts bare. In the Basic Education Act, it defines basic education as public and private. The effect of that is to disenfranchise more than 3 million Kenyans, 3 million students from inclusion into the basic education in terms of recognition, in terms of funding of capitation, in terms of accreditation of teachers, in terms of the teacher service, and in terms of all the infrastructure that goes into the budgeting under the basic education budgeting programs. In Mathare constituency alone, we have 54,000 school-going students. Out of these 54,000 school-going students, only 24,000 can fit into our public schools. So the question is, where do the other students go? This applies in Ruaraka, this applies in Kibra, this applies in Mukuru, this applies in all the major cities and towns and informal settlements in Kenya, where you have this category of schools that I have indicated are referred to as alternative provisions for basic education. These alternative learning centers are centers in which, Madam Speaker, during Sundays are churches, informal setups, mabati structures, where church goes on a Sunday. During the week, there are social halls where activity takes place. These are informal settlements and informal learning environments where 3 million Kenyans have been excluded by virtue of the restrictive definition under the Basic Education Act, and therefore then do not have the benefit of all what the other students in Kenya enjoy in terms of capitation, infrastructure building, and all this. Madam Speaker, I'd like to read an analysis that was prepared by the Budget and Appropriations Committee in January of 2024, in which at paragraph 14, they indicated that in spite of government efforts and interventions, there are still a number of out-of-schools children in this country. Statistics indicate that 17% of children in primary school age are not enrolled in schools, and that about 2 million children are enrolled in informal schools. According to 2014 UNICEF report titled Out of School Children Situation in Kenya, 852,000 children between the ages of 6 and 17 years are out of school. This report goes on to say that the statistics seems to collaborate with the statistics contained in the Economic Survey report and the 2019 census data. According to the 2019 population census, the number of persons who are between the ages of 10 and 14, these are considered to be upper primary, is 6.3 million, whereas the enrollment levels in primary school, class 5 to 8, is 5 million. The economic survey of 2020 is the source of this. From this, it is implied that close to about 1.3 million children who are supposed to be in primary school are either at home or attending informal schools. What this analysis by the Budget and Appropriations Committee indicates to us is what is the basis and the gist of the proposed amendment. Madam Speaker, there is a unique identifier called NEMIS that is the basis upon which we identify our students right from the time when they enter school up to the time when they finish, when they go to the university. It is a basis upon which capitation is calculated. It is the basis upon which, when they enter the examination class stages, the NEC uses this to register them as students. It is the basis upon which registration, mapping, and recognition of schools is done. There are these 3 million then students who are neither in public nor private, and because they are not, therefore, given the unique identifying code called NEMIS, are not planned for. So the question then is, what happens to these students? What happens to these students, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, when the Presidential Task Working Report on Education was launched and released by His Excellency the President, at page 11 of that report on equitable access and inclusion in education, Roman 15, it talks about technical and vocational educational training, and here it says, given the rapidly changing technology, there is a constant need to promote TVET to produce graduates and suited for rapidly changing context. It talks about MOE to institutionalize linkages with other industries and purposes, and it recognizes that there is a need to carry out further analysis and recommendation on how you can deal with upbeat schools. Madam Speaker, it is on the basis of this then that we came up with this amendment, and I'd like now to briefly go through some of the proposed amendments. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Clause 2 of the bill proposes to amend Section 2 of the Basic Education Bill to include in that definition, because that definition talks about basic education in a restrictive manner, to mean public or private school. We intend then by this definition to include, in terms of what the Constitution says as at Article 10, in terms of the government policy of compulsory free education and transition. These are policies of government. In terms of the UN treaties and conventions that I've referred to, in terms of the upbeat policy of 2009, and in terms of legal notice number 39, which remains at the level of legal notice and is hardly operationalized. Clause 2 seeks to ensure that this category of alternative provisions of basic education, school, or learners in informal settlements find their way into the definition of basic education, and therefore able to enjoy budgeting and other necessary infrastructure support that is given to schools. Clause 3 of the bill proposes to amend Section 7 of the Act to ensure that upbeat schools are represented in National Education Board by at least one person. Clause 4 of the bill proposes to amend Section 18 of the Principal Act to give Education Board the mandate to oversee operations and the management of upbeat schools in the county. Clause 5 of the bill proposes to amend Section 20 of the Principal Act to increase the composition of County Education Board by 2/3, while Clause 6 of the bill proposes to amend Sections 27 of the Principal Act to provide for the that the county government shall be responsible to provide funds to UPBET. Clause 7, on the other hand, of the bill proposes to amend Section 39 of the Act to add additional responsibility to the Cabinet Secretary to advise the national government on the financing of infrastructure for UPBET schools. Clause 8 of the bill proposes to amend Section 41 of the Act to require promotion of education in UPBET schools, while Clause 9 of the bill proposes to amend by listing and recognizing UPBET schools as one of the categories of schools in Kenya. Clause 10 of the bill proposes to amend the Act by inserting Part 5, and I had referred, Madam Speaker, to the legal notice number 39. Regulations 64 up to 78 have been lifted because they have continued to operate in the back burners without good effect, and so now they have been lifted so that they become part of the mainstream Basic Education Act itself. Clause 11 of the bill proposes to amend Section 79 of the Act to ensure that the County Education Board maintains a data of all registered alternative provision for basic education and training schools in the country. Clause 12 of the bill proposes to amend Section 86 of the Act to ensure that the funds of the Department of Education are used to promote UPBET schools. Madam Speaker, I'd like to conclude by highlighting, Madam Speaker, what are some of the categories that are recognized under what you call UPBET. UPBET schools, like I've indicated, are informal schools that operate in informal settlements, mostly in towns and cities within the Republic of Kenya. They include UPBET institutions. Madam Speaker, they include adult and continuing education centers. They include non-formal education and learning centers. They include alternative basic education programs and non-formal programs. They include mobile schools, and they include night schools. It is instructive to note that even as they operate outside the ambit of the Basic Education Act, they continue to operate under the curriculum that is used by all the other formal schools. They continue to operate under the Ministry of Education, and when the children transit and are supposed to do school examination, they sit the Kenya National Examination Council exams. So the question in the end is, why would 3 million Kenyans, in light of our Constitution 2010, that talks about equality, equalization, affirmative action, we have used affirmative action in order to equalize parts of this country that have been left behind. We have employed affirmative action to bring to speed persons with disabilities. We have used affirmative action to bring our women to the same level in terms of political engagement and representation. Why wouldn't we employ affirmative action so as to equalize marginalized informal centers, children who, as a result of historical marginalization and economic disadvantage, have found themselves outside the ambit of our formal education system? So this bill seeks to ensure that we actually do not treat these children as children of a lesser God, and that the Constitution, after 10 or 15 years, cannot envisage a situation in which 3 million Kenyans are not part of the planning, are not part of the budgeting, are not part of whom we provide for in terms of school infrastructure, are not part of what we plan for when we talk about capitation, and are not part of what we plan for when we recruit teachers, and therefore are taught by persons who either are volunteers, NGOs, persons who have no formal training. And yet we have a government policy of 100% transition, a government policy of free compulsory education, which is entrenched under Article 43 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, in light of that, I would like to move that this bill be supported, this bill be passed so that we amend the provisions of the Basic Education Act, and I will ask the Honorable TJ Kajwang, my neighbor constituency member of parliament, a third-term member of parliament, and whom has a lot of similar schools, upbeat schools, which are affected and which would benefit as a result of this amendment. I move, and I ask the Honorable TJ Kajwang to second. Thank you.
Honorable Kajwang, you may proceed.
Madam Speaker, I woke up early this morning with vigor and energy to come and support my brother from Mathare. I must appreciate him for debating this very ably. You see the resources that are coming from Mathare. They are not just depth in substance, but they are also passionate. If you check the National School Census results of 2024, you will see that Ruaraka has the highest density of these schools which are termed to be alternative provision of basic education and training. The census are actually demudated. They talk about 1.2 learners, but as the able legislator has said, there are more than 3 million of these children in schools. Madam Speaker, when we signed off the 2013 Constitution, the 2010 Constitution, we decided as a nation to lay in that bed that we set. And so we talked about lofty concepts, including non-discriminative practices, including affirmative actions, including raising Kenyans in the same level in terms of dignity, social services, and so on. We boldly decided as a nation to bring up all these institutions or all these categories of Kenyans to the national mapping on how to treat them. But unfortunately, we have not implemented it fully. You see, Madam Speaker, children do not ask for visas where to go to school. And even if they did ask for visas, they would refuse or they would rebel if visas were given to stop them from walking from Mathare into Ruaraka or Kibra into Mukuru. And we do not, parents in the areas that I'm talking about are not happy that their children are going in schools in these mabati structures, in these makeshifts which are otherwise churches, in these corridors that are otherwise chicken pen in the evening and classes in the afternoon. They are not happy. Nobody is happy to ever take his child into squalid places. The reason they do that is because of the economic circumstances that we find ourselves. Madam Speaker, people are hungry out here. People are poor out here. This is not just a city or an urban problem. This is a national problem that we must face. And so if we are talking about national hunger, we must also talk about national hunger for education. If we are talking about gender parity, by the way, if you check that statistics, you will find, interestingly, that in the upbeat institutions, the gender parity has closed to almost 1.9%, meaning that in these squalid places, mothers and children and fathers find it easy to take their children, and they take them regardless of gender, boys and girls. So you will find that in these schools, we have reached gender parity, which has not been reached in the traditional or conservative schools, public schools. You will also notice something that when schools introduced free lunches and free provision of food, we have attained about 96% of transition to CBC. It means that some of these schools, the reason, Madam Speaker, a child goes to school is probably the fact that there is food in that institution. And so this is a compassionate bill. It is a dignity bill. This bill raises, it opens questions as to what really happens in the areas where common mwananchi live. So whether you are in Mombasa, whether you are in the cities in Kisumu or in Eldoret, or whether you are in upcoming cities like Meru, you will find these upbet schools. And interestingly, they provide 65% of education. So think about it. Let it sink. All these children that we are training in schools, 65% of them are, they are from this regime of education. So think about it. How really will this 65% transit into higher education, into tertiary education, or in vocational education, if we do not provide for them substantively, if we do not think about them in capitation, if we do not think about them in infrastructure? So the planning, education planning has been skewed, and I think we want to right this wrong. Recently, we had a big issue. Not just recently, it is still even going on. Education officials, they know that these schools exist. They even come and inspect these schools. They even know who goes inside there. But when the children now register for exam, they deny them the code. There is some code in National Examination Council that every center must have to be able to get the children up there. So they deny them. Now they are telling them that these are not registered institutions, these are not facilities that can train children. But incidentally, they pay for the centers. And the education officials accept that money, although they don't receive. Yeah, they don't receive, but they accept that money. And if there is a problem in those schools, they will be the first ones, the first responders in those schools. And so this has been used as a milk cow for these education officers. They are all over running around and talking to directors or proprietors, do this or I'll shut the school down. And chiefs and so on, do this or I will shut the school down. And parents are in turmoil, are despondent, and they're trying to find out the mistake that the parents ever did was just to be poor and to live in squalid circumstances and to live in the informal sectors. And so even when we will look at this bill seriously in terms of perfecting it, and I want to urge members to be able to be vigilant on this bill and propose amendments. Like, for example, I will want to propose amendments that regulate the sector. We are not saying that somebody who is untrained should give services or education services to these children. We want to get the government to be able to give us standards of teachers who can teach in these schools, standards on how these schools can exist in clean environment, in structures that children will be comfortable. The ministry must give us the standards, and that is what the Constitution demands of them, that they are the ones who must give us standards and inspection and supervision. But supervision and inspection also goes with funds. You have to give funds to these people. So I'm happy that the member for Mathare is proposing, for example, that you and I will also look at these schools to give education facilities like bursaries to these children and to promote them, these directors, in terms of how they come up. This is where wananchi live. This is where you and I will serve. And so if there is any need for that bursary to support anybody or for general NGCDF, these are the places where you should put money. Let the government think about those national schools and the boarding schools and the big schools, but you and I, we must focus on where the person is. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to second this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, I now propose the question that the Basic Education Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 3 of 2025 be read a second time. Okay, honorable members who want to contribute, press the intervention button, and I'll start with the honorable member for Kibra, Honorable Orero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would wish that the members don't see this bill as bill for MPs from informal sector. Olwach is from Mathare, TJ is from Ruaraka, and I'm also from Kibra. My colleagues, this is one of the bills that we will ask you to support. The alternative provision for basic education and training, that is UPED schools. These are some of the schools which are neither private nor public. They are nowhere between these two sets of schools. And that is why they are called UPED schools. In informal settlement like Kibra, we have about 300 of these kind of schools. While in public school, like in primary public schools, we only have 11 public primary schools. So the rest of the kids in our informal settlement, they find themselves in this school. Now, the Basic Education Act, as my colleague has proposed, should include the registration of these schools, the mapping of these schools, the funding of these schools, and the recognition by the government of these schools. Now, if you look at the parameters used to identify the ongoing students in primary, pre-primary, and secondary school, we have a system known as NEMI system, which captures the number of students in public primary schools and public secondary schools. Now, those students who are in UPED schools are never captured by the NEMIs. We have put this to the ministry, and now they are coming with a more elaborate system, software called Chemis, where we believe that all students in this country will have the opportunity to be captured in those frameworks. Now, why would the government not support these kids? It is not their wish that they were born in informal settlement. It is not their wish, it is not the wish of their parents that they are poor and they cannot afford those schools. We are therefore urging the government and the relevant authority and our members of parliament that we pass this bill so that our kids who are not advantaged to join the public and private schools can also have a chance to advance their education. We believe that these kids, one time or the other, will be members of this country in high places, high-ranking places, and the funding model that is used to help those students in public must also trickle to this UPED school. I therefore take this opportunity to urge my colleague members of parliament to pass this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I don't have a card. Thank you. The Honorable Mangale
Chief Romondo, member for Lungalunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. First, I stand to support the bill or the amendment which Honorable Member has brought before this House. It has come at a time when many of us had the same thinking, because then, apart from the informal schools in slums and many other cities, we have others who fall under the same category, but they are in the rural areas. But before I go into that, we all know that education is a basic need. This is to mean that if we wish to promote and make these people empowered, those children who are not recognized per se, to be empowered, then we need to actually give them an opportunity. Some of us who are here, and many of us, if I'm not wrong, have been given an opportunity at one time, so to access education, and now here we are. I want to start by saying that, Madam Speaker, we've been having laws which are not inclusive. For example, we are saying that in Kenya, basic education is compulsory and for all. But then here we are. We've been given statistics and data here that almost 1.6 children are there, not in the formal school, and they are not recognized. They don't get any support in form of the capitation, the infrastructure improvement, or any other support when it comes to education. Only that the sin they have is that they are in informal settlements, or rather and also their schools are in informal setup. Now that we have this idea to amend the education bill, this is an opportunity where we have been given to ensure that our children who are in the informal setup will also access education. In that, one, the government should be made responsible to ensure that resources also trickle down to them. This is by ensuring that, one, we recognize their schools or the schools which they go. That is by registration as proposed. Second, by provision of proper infrastructure, and again, to ensure that they get the capitation through the system which is being used in the other school setup. But again, there's a challenge which maybe I would like to put across. The issue of NEMIS, it's also a problem even in the formal schools, because then the requirement is the children who are supposed to join school must have a birth certificate. These kids or the parents are being punished for issues which are not in their control. For instance, a parent visits the office and then is told materials are not there to print the birth certificate. We need to have an alternative way to identify our school children, because then a human being is not an amorphous. You can identify a human being. The moment a child is taken to school, the government must take responsibility of this child to ensure that, one, they recognize that child as a school-going child, and all what pertains, what he or she is supposed to get, must be provided to him. That is to start with the capitation, not necessarily forcing to have a birth certificate, which the government itself cannot provide on time. Again, it will help the schools, even the ones we are proposing, to ensure that they have enough resources to serve the children. And this idea will also improve the access, because then we are talking of access to children who we are in the normal setup, per se, let me use that word. But then we are forgetting that these children who are in the informal settlement are also supposed to access education. So the moment we support this idea and this amendment, it will be one way to improve access in education. We have been giving chances to people who are exploiting parents, who are exploiting children in the name of helping them in the informal setup. But as I've started, we have other setups like the integrated schools, mostly are found in the coast region. Integrated schools are schools where the kids are supposed to learn religion at one time, and then the normal learning, if there's any normal learning, so to say. So we are saying, as we look into the children who are in the slums, who are not in the normal education setup, we are saying also, those children who are in the integrated setup are supposed also to be included in this thinking. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I wish to thank you for this chance, and I support.
The Honorable Gladys Boss.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. First, I want to start by thanking the Honorable Anthony Alwoch, member for Mathare, my former student. I'm very proud of you. I think this is a very important bill. You have touched right where the problem is. You're actually bringing attention to the fact that what is in our law is not in tandem with reality. It's very different. And you're now making it a reality. Because the fact is, those informal schools exist. The fact is, our children go to those informal schools. The fact is that the reason why the children are in those informal schools is probably because they can't access the formal schools. So just the way we recognize that the government can't provide all the medical care in the country, that we have to actually have private hospitals that do provide it, and faith-based hospitals. So it's the same thing again in education. And this has been a big lasting problem. And I must say that it's not only in Nairobi, urban areas, that you're finding that the low-income areas that you think that that problem exists. Similarly, we have similar problems in Uasin Gishu County, because it's an urban county. We have low-income areas within Uasin Gishu, and they do have those informal schools. I know a lot of work has been done to try and change that, but the reality is they still exist. And we should see this as being able to complement the government's effort to give basic education to all our children, that it can only make us better people. And also, it makes it clear that the right to basic education is a right that you must enjoy directly as that young child. It is not something you can only enjoy if there is a formal facility through which you can now enjoy it. It really doesn't make sense. It's as if the right to education belongs to the formal school rather than the individual child. So a lot has to be done also with the registration of those children. And I think as part of this, there must be some regulations about the turnaround time of issuing birth certificates, so that those children, in order to be able to formalize it, is to be able to put them on the NIMI system. A lot of them also don't have birth certificates because it's just very difficult. There's a place called Jabali in Uasin Gishu, and I remember they told me the children don't have birth certificates because the nearest place to get birth certificates is in Eldoret town. So there's no way they're going to come from the farthest part of Uasin Gishu to go and look for birth certificates. And I remember asking, why can't the registration people go there to the school and then just have the parents arrive that day, give out their paperwork? They should be able to do it. So we have to find innovative ways of resolving these problems rather than just saying there is a Huduma center. So the teachers, even in the formal schools, they complain that they can't get the right amount of capitation because they don't have all the children registered because they don't have birth certificates. So it's all around that issue, and I think probably when we'll be recommending amendments, those are some of the things that we must look at, that we should make it the responsibility for them to issue the birth certificates. And then also, what is important is to ensure that even all these schools are actually registered so that we know that they do exist. There must be a registration system for them so that we know they are there, so that even as you say the inspectors go there, we know that they are recognized in some form of record, because it's almost like there's no files kept on them and so on. And so with that, I wish to support, and I definitely will make sure that during the time that we can propose amendments, we can enrich it and improve it, but we thank the members for supporting this. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Honorable Dr. James Nikal, member for Seme.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this bill. This is actually a constitutional matter, a matter of inclusivity. Education is actually a basic right in our Constitution. Inclusion is a basic right in our Constitution. And yet, the current situation in our education system does not recognize the alternative provision of basic education and training. And yet, as we have heard from the mover and other speakers, these are far more children in certain areas than in the formal schools that we recognize. But they are not in our formal systems. And yet, if you look at our policies, we actually touch on them here and there. If you look at the policy, the Albert policy of 2009, it actually recognizes that this category of schools exist. The Basic Education Regulations of 2015 also recognizes that they exist. But if you get to the Basic Education Act of 2013, it defines only two categories of schools, public schools and private schools. And these actually, therefore, remain hanging in the middle. And the children in these schools do not get recognized. Our main record system for our children in education sector is actually NEMIS. Now, once these children are missing in NEMIS, even the budget process excludes them. The provision of funding excludes them. And that's a major exclusion that we really cannot afford. And I must say, let me also take this opportunity to say, this mirrors a major problem we have in education that as a country, we really need to address. There's a lot of effort, and I think members of the Education Committee are here, to make changes in the education system. One thing I see that we need to look at, we have very many policies coming one after the other. And I think it is actually very difficult to harmonize these policies. If you go back a little, you'll find we had the policy of delocalization, then we had the policy of 100% transition, then we came to the bigger change of competence-based education. When the task force came, we are now looking at placing children in comprehensive schools, junior secondary school, senior secondary school. And then with all that, we also came with a new funding system, particularly at university level, while we are still actually also running the HELP system. Even the admission system at university, we moved away from the joint board admission and we have the COOPS admission. Now, Madam Speaker, when you have so many policies, and actually they are all desirable, looking at each one individually, it is actually progress if we could go ahead and achieve them. But I think it is like a mixed crop farming. You can't have maize and millet and beans and mung beans all in the same garden. Individually, each can be a good crop, but mixed up together, it becomes difficult. And administratively, it's actually a nightmare. So I think that's another issue we should address. I support this bill because this bill attempts, in a way, to actually address this and bring at least this category of children into our mainstream planning system. And you look at it, it starts in clause 2, is actually getting the proper definition of education and including this upbet in the definition, which previously was just private and public. And then if you look at in the management of schools in clause 3, now they want the upbet schools to be represented in the National Education Board by at least 2 persons to cater for their needs. If you are not there, you are not there. So these people need to be actually in these boards. Then you look at clause 4, which are, again at county level are bringing them in so that they can be oversighted by the county education boards. And so that these can supervise them, see what is happening there, what the member for Honorable Kajwang was saying, that they do recognize when some payments are to be made without receipts. Well, that's a good way to recognize people. But now this bill brings it in. And if you look at then clause 6, which says the county government shall be responsible to provide funds to albeit schools, among other schools listed in the subsection. And really, we are bringing them in. And importantly, if you look at clause 7, Madam Speaker, this bill is giving the cabinet secretary the authority on financing. And I think this is important. If you look at infrastructure, even with our CDF, maybe our colleagues in Nairobi, where these are recognized and are many, are looking at these schools. But in most of our CDF, we consider them after we have considered the other schools, and yet they have our children there. And then if we put them, the clause 9 also brings them in and gets them listed amongst all other schools. If this is actually, if we pass this bill, and I'll encourage our colleagues to actually pass this bill, it will be a major improvement for these children who are in these schools. And you will be surprised, if we do that, the numbers will shock us. And when we go to the budgeting process, we may now have to realize we must put more money in this area to cater for these children. But without doing this, without getting them into NEMIS, without getting them into county education boards, international education boards, they'll be lost to our system. With that, Madam Speaker, I support this bill.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Makwiny constituency, Honorable Susan Kiamba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to also contribute to this very important bill amendment by Honorable Aluoch. Honorable Speaker, it is actually very disheartening that we are talking about the very poor who are not able to access quality education. Because we realize that in these so-called apex schools, if you look first at the learning environment, the learning environment by itself is not promoting what we call learning. It's even against the very basic education that other children are getting in this country. So I think that is actually, Honorable Speaker, very great marginalization. More so, these are the very poor people that really need our services, need the support from the government. It's very unfortunate that it has taken this long for us not to have recognized that we have the very vulnerable children in the slums and even in some pockets in rural areas who do not access education because of poverty. So I think the amendment being proposed is actually very much in order, because if every curriculum has deliverables and every country that offers an educational system, there is the desirables that they want the learners to achieve. When we have a significant proportion of our learners learning what we do not know, it's even a risk. Maybe that is the reason why we accuse families, young people in the informal sector of being rowdy and being having criminal behavior. Because if the curriculum, we are not sure what they are taught in these schools, then they could be taught anything. Because if the government does not control and we do not know what they are actually learning in these schools. Honorable Speaker, we also realize that in these schools, the so-called apex schools, the infrastructure, the teaching, learning materials, are they there? Actually, are they learning? I think those are the questions I'm asking themselves. Are they learning? And if they are learning, what learning are they learning? Is it helpful to themselves? Is it helpful to this country? Who is controlling what they are learning? And that's why I also, in this particular bill, I also propose some amendments. Because how do we recognize what we do not know? I think when we say let's recognize them and integrate them, I think to me that will be shortchanging learners in these schools. We cannot recognize as a government, we cannot recognize what we do not know. Because these other schools, they need to be mainstreamed. We need to be bold enough and give them enough resources that they get the resources required to learn what other learners are learning. Because if we say we maintain them in these apex schools, I think we'll be mainstreaming marginalization. Because it means they will continue with the same culture, the same curriculum, the same deliverables, and outputs that are not in tandem with what other learners are getting in this particular country. So, Honorable Speaker, as we amend, I would also request Honorable Oloch to consider the issue of, you also suggested we need to have the counties monitor them and have a board. I'm also thinking we should not include them and exclude them at the same time. Why would we need to have a basic school in Kibera that looks different from a basic school in makwiny? I don't see any reason. I think we are being very apologetic in terms of not wanting to give them the resources they require. If they have been marginalized for these years, they don't need to get a peace march. Yani kuwekwa kiraka, sorry for using that. We want them to be in, but not fully. I think for me, we need to transform these schools to be like another school in this particular country and to be monitored, supported like another school. I know one of the major reasons why they are the way they are is because there is no space. But recently we are seeing space being created through affordable housing, even in slums. Why can't we create space for these schools through the same scheme? Because if we can create houses for the parents in the slums,
We have a point of order from
Honorable, we should also be able to create.
1 minute. Honorable Dr. Mutunga, your hand was up. Okay. You may proceed, member for makwiny.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm saying the major reason, because I've worked in the slums, why they are not even recognized. Because even the space to put up the school is a nightmare. The school is hanging somewhere. And I think we need to be bold in this particular amendment so that we suggest, as we create space for even affordable housing, let's create space for these schools so that they also can meet the standards that are being given to other learners elsewhere. Honorable Speaker, the issue of registration with the county and board management, I think I'm requesting the amendment. If we would also consider, we don't need to create another parallel system for managing learners. If we have a sub-chief, the simplest unit in government being supported in that village, how come we cannot support a school? Is that genuine? I think we need to be bold and genuine, put the required sources in these informal sectors, transform the apex schools into a normal school, a basic school, like anywhere else in this country, so that those learners can enjoy quality education like another Kenyan learner. I think with those few remarks, I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. With those many remarks. The Honorable Dr. Mutunga, member for Tigania West.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to catch your eye. There was no point of order. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I am happy to be part of this particular process, discussing this education, approach to education, where people find themselves in a situation and they have to survive somehow. No one would like to be informal. Everyone would like to be formal. And especially no one would like to go through an informal type of education. Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank the Honorable Anthony Oluoch for scrutinizing the Education Act and highlighting some of these very important issues. And going further to propose amendments to the Act so that we may be able to align these institutions with the preferences of the country. Yet, because we are talking of developing this country, we should be talking of developing everyone, and development is about individuals. So we should not leave anyone behind. Honorable Speaker, what Kenya Kwanza is trying to do in terms of doing the affordable housing through the comprehensive approach, where they are doing houses themselves, and they are also doing the markets, and they are doing the schools, is an approach to deal with this particular issue. But Honorable Speaker, I do not think that approach will be extremely comprehensive if there is no legislation, or if we do not change this particular legislation to focus on these areas. So, Honorable Speaker, through this bottom-up economic transformation agenda approach, we would like a lot more investment to go into some of these informal settlements. The reason being that this is where we have many people, and the idea is to develop our people, is not necessarily to put up infrastructure. Honorable Speaker, there is need for identification of these institutions. We know they exist, but not all of them are known where they are. There is also need for documentation of this institution. There is need for mapping of this institution, and I believe this is what is being proposed in the legislation. There is also need for registration and recognition to the extent that these institutions should also be supported through capitation and through other forms of support. Honorable Speaker, I think without that alignment, it might even be difficult for the members of parliament who come from such areas to directly and significantly support these institutions. So this legislative, change approach, or the amendment that is being proposed, will give us, those members who come from such areas, an opportunity, and also will align their investment through the National Government Constituency Development Fund to support these institutions, even as we look at how the bigger government can do it. Honorable Speaker, several policies have come by, and they have recognized these institutions, but there hasn't so far been a legal, a change in the, a proposal for legal redress of the same. And this particular approach, therefore, by Honorable Oluoch, does justice to this particular lacuna, and therefore it is important for us to support this motion. Honorable Speaker, there is the risk of remaining informal when you find yourself in such a situation. There is also the risk of being excluded from the normal Kenyan setup. Honorable Speaker, there is no education that is informal, because if you look at the definition of education, education is transfer of knowledge, and there is no transfer of knowledge which is really informal. What there is the settlement that is informal. But Honorable Speaker, if these institutions remain excluded as it is right now, then we risk to have the individuals who come from such institutions, from such approaches, or from just such packaging, remaining excluded in the society, which is a discrimination, a form of discrimination that is negated by our Constitution 2010. Honorable Speaker, these institutions have also been missing out of the regulation. Education is highly regulated. It's regulated in what is supposed to be taught. I believe, and I know, Honorable Speaker, for a fact, that education is so much regulated in Kenya that even the textbooks that are used in secondary schools or primary schools, they are printed from the same source and distributed across the country. So this setup needs to be included so that we have our Kenyan child being treated the same. And therefore, For us to be able to enhance that regulation, there is need for the change in the legislation. Finally, Honorable Speaker, I would like to launch this approach because it's an alternative mechanism of enabling people to learn. Those who have been in this particular setup and those who have been involved in it, and in most cases you realize that they are doing it through philanthropy or basically supporting these children to learn, supporting the learners at that particular level. Honorable Speaker, those who have been there, they deserve our recognition, even as members of parliament, or even as this House recognizes them. And I would like to expressly thank them, anybody who has been involved in this particular process, because it's recognizing and realizing the need to help future generation of Kenyans who find themselves in disadvantaged situations without having anything to do about it. Honorable Speaker, I support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable Rindikiri Mugambi, member for Buri constituency.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to start my remarks by congratulating Honorable Oluoch, and I wish Mary Odhiambo would give him some space because I'm addressing a very important matter on this amendment. I want to thank you for bringing this matter before this House, and I want to give you a consolation statement that I am a member of Parliament of Alulo constituency, which has 5 slums. Secondly, I want to let you know that I grew up in Mathare, next to Ruma, so I can identify myself with what is happening in the slums. So you are not alone in this mission. Madam Speaker, I agree and support the amendment, but we need to build it further, and that's where I want to dwell on. We have majority of these people going to these informal alternative learning institutions, PWDs, and people with cerebral palsy. Some of these people are the victims of the formal education in majority of these areas. They are not able to travel for long. They are not able to move from one point to the other. I'll ask my friend to look at that amendment so that we build, as we proceed, we need to cater for the people with special needs in the slum areas because these people can't move even to long distance where formal education is. And even the issue of the materials for learning in these institutions is another matter. Madam Speaker, we have kids from very poor families. And I want to join Dr. Mutunga by saying these people, they are there because of the informal settlement. And the government is trying to address that. What if we say we eliminate all the informal settlement? Would we be talking about this? We will still be talking about it because the problem is not only confined in the slum areas, it is also in the rural areas. So we need to expand the thinking. We need to expand the statistics so that we can be able to build up a very strong case on this. The 100 learners, many of them are 100 learners. Why? Because they have never got opportunity to do that. It so happens, majority of the migrants to the urban centers are people who never got the advantage in the rural areas. So they are coming to town. And what are they doing? They're having more problem. What am I building on? We have nomadics. They still have the same problem like you are experiencing in the rural areas. Madam Speaker, this is a very important amendment. We cannot say free education, but we are limiting the ones to access. I totally agree with your observation that we need to have a more inclusive management system. And this management system must therefore open doors for funding, regulations, etc. Madam Speaker, the biggest problem would be how we are going to regulate these institutions. Because they could be, if they are not properly regulated and supervised, will they be able to achieve the objective, assuming that we have done exactly what the bill is proposing to do? So, Madam Speaker, there is need to have a proper framework. For example, I agree we need somebody to represent this institution to the bones, either the national level or the county. But now, how is that nomination going to be? We must have a framework, meaning all these institutions across the country must be recognized so that when they come to nomination, we can go and say, this is the person to represent. So I think we need to come up with the criteria for nomination. Madam Speaker, as I'm talking to you now, I am proceeding to Kenyatta International Conference Center. As you are aware, I am the acting chairman and the vice chairman of the Committee on Housing, Urban Planning, and Public Works. One of the themes of this conference is an international conference, is building climate resilient with the urban poor. And education is one key thing that is being discussed. You may ask, how is it being discussed? It's being discussed because the habitat that we want to develop in the urban poor are people going to live there. It means that the government is attempting to address this issue, although in the long term. If we are able to build so many affordable houses, social houses, in our slums as it is taking place right now, one of the subsidiary services that need to be enhanced in our informal settlement is education institutions, medical facilities. So, I need to have a discussion, we need to have a discussion with Mr. Oriach so that we look at the Housing Levy Act and see what can also be built, because many people are now making noise saying, we are building schools. They need to know, if we build the house, we need to support the people who are sitting there, who are living there. So this is very important, that we also look at other amendments to build onto this. But I want to say this. It is a time that we really need to give everybody an opportunity to learn. To learn. There will be complications. How are we going to regulate? Where are we going to be fixed? That should not be a problem. The problem is that we have gotten it right through this amendment. And once this is done, it now left the issue of implementation. And one of the implementation is what I've just said, building climate resilient with the urban poor. That's one route, because we are addressing an environment, a good element of living and a good environment of learning. Number two, we are talking about capitation. Mr. Honorable Oluoch, I have a problem with the capitation for the people under 18. But we still have people who want to learn who are even over 18. Even when you look at the benefit extended, even in medical terms, we say until a student is 20 years, 25 or 27. So we need to open up that so that they also can get a capitation. Who tells you that somebody learning in these schools cannot go to the university? Who has told you that they cannot go to various higher learning? So we should not limit to this age 18. As long as they have shown the resilient, they have shown the potential for growth, we need also to support them financially.
Leader, I'm trying to...
Yes, we have a problem with Mary.
I didn't want to interfere with the discussion between you and
They are not even listening.
The Honorable
I think we're having a problem because we are calling to your attention.
Order. Member for Buri. You know, you're having a very interesting conversation that I am not able to concentrate. And I'm sure even those who are around you are not able to hear what the Honorable Member for Buri is saying. And he's giving a very strong point about finding yourself in a situation where you marginalize the marginalized further. So if you can consult in lower tones, you cannot seek a point of order from the speaker. So I'll not allow you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So unfortunate.
It's our senior.
Based on what you were saying, yes, I can allow you to do that based on what the member for Buri was saying.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, my apologies that we are consulting very loudly. It's just that the Honorable Member was not actually aware that we were consulting in relation to very important issues related to what he was saying. The marginalization of marginalization arises out of zoning. And we are discussing about zoning, Madam Speaker. So we are actually in tandem with him.
Honorable Mili, I do not know which zoning. It could be a different kind of zoning, but you proceed. Please conclude, Member for Buri.
Thank you. You know, Mary will always come up with something to get herself out of the problem. The problem is not Mary. The problem is my friend. I don't know what he is hunting for. Madam Speaker, I was saying, you know, a kid can go all the way, somebody need to go all the way to age 25. So this age limit, the mover of the bill is limiting. I hope he is listening. Madam Speaker, the age 18 is limiting, and please look at that. The other thing is this, Madam Speaker. When it comes to competition, there must be a clear regulation on how this is going to be standardized. Because, Madam Speaker, what we are dealing with is the element of marginalization. How are we going to ensure that this competition is sustained and universally acceptable to all areas? The demands in the rural poor is not the same as demands in the urban poor. So we have to be very careful about this issue of competition. Because I'm seeing some formal schools right now have problems with this called competition. They are situated in arid areas, in poor areas. So even in utilizing this money, it's becoming as a disadvantage. So when we talk about competition, we must come up with a minimum amount of competition, which cut across. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, we will, as I said, we will sit down with the mover, because there are some things that we can work together to enhance this bill for posterity. We are not doing this.
Please give him a minute.
Yeah. We are not doing this bill knowing that slums will remain there forever. Let's do this bill knowing that we need to eliminate the issues of slums in this country. That should be the focus. Otherwise, we should not be a bill to enhance informality in an informal setup. So this is something that the government is focusing on, and all of us need to support this government. And I want to thank you, Oroch, because you are part and parcel of the broad-based government, and your thinking is going to enhance the good image of government performance. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Chair, and also, Chair, to add that one of our members, the member for Makwiny, really appreciated the work that is being done through affordable housing. And she was almost saying that this can be used, to support these children. So a lot of good work is being done by your committee and the government. Asante. Mheshimiwa Zamzam Chimba, mbunge wa Mombasa.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, hakuna kitu kibaya kama umaskini. Na wakati mwingi maskini huwa hapati mtu wa kumzungumzia. Ana matatizo mengi kule kwenye mabanda, mitaa mabanda, lakini leo niweze kumpongeza Mheshimiwa Oloch na nikuombee Mungu azidi kukubariki sana kwa kuwakumbuka hawa watoto ambao wanajaribu kutafuta elimu katika elimu ya msingi katika mitaa ya mabanda. almaarufu AFBET. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka niseme kama kuna watu ambao wanafaa kuangaliwa vizuri, Mheshimiwa Spika, na hata katiba yetu imewalenga vizuri, isipokuwa tulikuwa tu tunawasahau, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni hawa watu ambao wanakaa katika mitaa ya mabanda. Mama hajui amepata shilingi 5, ajue anunue maji ya kunywa, ama ajue atanunua chakula, ajue atamsomesha vipi mtoto wake, kwa sababu hana namna. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, hawa wazazi ambao wanapeleka watoto wao katika hizi shule za mitaa mabanda, Mheshimiwa Spika, si kwa mapenzi yao, ni kwa sababu ya hali ngumu walizonazo katika maisha. Mheshimiwa Spika, nakumbuka kuwa pale mitaa ya Jomvu tuna AFBET hapo, kuna zingine ziko Kisauni na Likoni. Niliwahi kuwatembelea, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ukiangalia zile hali, na wengi hapa najua si wote ambao wako katika bunge hili walitoka katika familia ambazo zinajiweza. Wengi kama kina Oloch, kina Mama Zamzam, tulitoka kwa mitaa ya mabanda. Tunaelewa vile umaskini unavonuka, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndio maana nimpongeze Mheshimiwa kwa kuweza kutetea hawa watoto na hizi informal schools ambazo ziko katika mitaa ya mabanda. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, unapata mama anatamani, ana ndoto na mtoto wake, lakini hawezi kumpeleka shule, pengine iko mbali, hana vile anaweza kumpeleka na usafiri, hana pesa pengine za kulipa zile vitu 2-3 ambazo zatakikana kule. Mheshimiwa Spika, huyu mzazi anaishia kupeleka mtoto pale karibu, ambayo anaweza pengine hata anakaa kwa deni, analipa 50 pengine wakati anapata. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hiyo kuna umuhimu sana wa serikali kuweza kutoa capitation na kuweza kusupport hizi shule za mitaa ya mabanda. Mheshimiwa Spika, ieleweke kuwa hata birth certificate, Mheshimiwa Spika, mzazi kupata lazima aende akalipie, na atataka usafiri, pengine akitoka kule mbali asafiri kwenda kule na apate pia na mapeni ya kulipia birth certificate, na pengine akifika kule anapata kuwa kitabu cha birth certificate kimeisha, anaambiwa utarudi, kila akienda nakata tamaa kwa sababu uwezo wake ni mgumu. Kwa wale ambao tumekaa katika ile maisha ambayo hujui hata kama mchana mtakula, wacha asubuhi, wacha mchana, hata usiku, yani unatamani hata ile mama yetu alikuwa akitupikia ile chai ya rangi, akipata sukari kidogo anaikaranga alafu anachemsha vile, sisi tunakunywa na hiyo ndio chakula mpaka kesho yake. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hiyo hawa watu ambao wanakaa katika mitaa ya mabanda, watoto wao kwenda katika hizi AFBET school si kupenda kwao, na ndio kuna umuhimu sana tuongeze katika hii bill, tuweze kurekebisha katika katiba yetu, tuwawekee nafasi na mwanya wa kuweza kupata support kutoka kwa serikali, na hasa ili bunge limepitisha pesa nyingi sana za kwenda county government. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika ugatuzi. Hawa watoto wako kule chini, na kama tunataka kuona umuhimu wa ugatuzi, basi magavana wetu lazima wajue hawa watoto wako kwenye himaya yao. Ikiwa wanajenga ECDs, wanajenga hizo za watoto kule, lazima pia waangalie hawa watoto wanaweza wakaangaliwa vipi, ambao wanakaa kule mbali na ECDs, waweze kuboresha yale zile sehemu zao za masomo, waweze kupata hizi capitation, wawekwe katika county government boards hizo za education, wawe wanakuwa regularized, waangaliwe watoto wanafanya nini kule. Manake kuna sehemu pia, Mheshimiwa Spika, utapata pengine mwalimu ndo anahusika hata kumdhulumu mtoto. Mheshimiwa Spika, ikiwa hakuna mtu ambaye anamwekea jicho yule mtoto kuweza kuangalia kuwa watoto wanasoma katika mazingira mazuri na wanakaa kama watoto wa Kenya wengine, basi inakuwa huyu mtoto anadhulumika na yuko katika taifa la Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, hata watoto kupata nemesis ili waweze kuingia katika mfumo wa elimu ya Kenya inakuwa ngumu kwa yule mtoto wa mtaa mabanda, na kwa hivyo tunaweza kuweka mwanya ya hawa watoto, ikiwa kama hawajapata wanaweza wakashughulikiwa vipi. Je, kitambulisho cha mama kinatosha kumweka huu mtoto shuleni ili aweze kuingia darasani? Mheshimiwa Spika, Je, chifu anaweza kumwandikia barua akasema huu mtoto namjua ni wa hapa, kwa vile hakuna uwezo na hii ni serikali yake, hawezi kwenda kusoma Tanzania, hawezi kwenda kusoma mataifa mengine wakati amezaliwa Kenya, lakini amezaliwa katika hali ngumu na hali tata sana ya mitaa ya mabanda. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, Wizara ya Elimu inafaa izingatie mambo mengi sana Mheshimiwa Spika, na hata ndani ya Wizara ya Elimu tumeona kuna sheria nyingi ambazo zinamlinda mtoto wa Kenya akiwa kwenye masomo yake, lakini utapata hata mashule mengi, wacha mitaa ya mabanda, mashule mengi pia wafuatilii. Juzi na jana nafikiri mliona kama niko katika shule ya Konslata pale Likoni, na nimeenda na barua kutoka Wizara ya Elimu Mheshimiwa Spika. Kuna watoto wanasoma pale, mimi mwenyewe nimesoma Bishop Sulmeti Girls ambayo ni shule ya Katoliki, na nilivaa buibui, nilivaa hijabu nikienda shuleni, nikaruhusiwa nikasoma. Kuna Sacred Heart wanaruhusiwa, wanavaa watoto wa Kiislamu, na wale wengine ambao wana dini yao wanaruhusiwa Mheshimiwa Spika. Lakini hii shule ilikuwa sijui kama Director Education alikuwa anaangalia watoto wa Kiislamu wanafukuzwa wakivaa hijabu, anaambiwa toka, huwezi kuingia darasani. Mtoto wa Kiislamu Jumatano na Alhamisi anapelekwa mass kwenda kula ile sacrament na ajui ni nini Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati katiba ya Kenya ibara ya 34 clause 1, 2, 3 and 4 inamruhusu mtoto kuangalia itikadi yake ya dini bila kumdhulumu yule mwenzake Mheshimiwa Spika. Unapata watoto walikuwa pengine kuna Biblia iko shuleni, lakini Qur'ani haiwezi kukaa pale kumpa mwelekeo yule mtoto. Wakati wa swala anaweza kukaa pale darasani, hawezi kwenda kusali kwa sababu hakuna mahali pametengewa. Lakini wakati ya mass unapata wanatolewa wote, wanaenda mass. Ndio vitu ambavyo nilikuwa nazungumzia. Sisi hapa ndani ya bunge tunaamiliana vizuri. Ukimwangalia yule mheshimiwa anayetoka, yuko na ile kofia yake vizuri ya kikorino, amekaa vizuri, amepewa mwanya wake hapa. Mimi Mama Zamzam kama Muislamu nimepewa mwanya wangu ndani ya bunge. Kwa nini shule zetu na wale ma principals na administrators wasifuate sheria ambayo iko katika katiba? Ukisema inakuwa fitna na mambo mengi Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo watoto wetu si wa mitaa ya banda peke yake, watoto wetu wote lazima waangaliwe kisheria vile katiba ya Kenya inavyosema Mheshimiwa Spika. Mimi hawa wazazi wa mitaa ya banda, na niweze kumpongeza sana Mheshimiwa Loch, nilikuwa nikiwafikiria kila siku. Mheshimiwa Spika, ungeenda pale unapata watoto wamekaa chini kwa matope. Watoto wanasoma wako chini kwa matope. Mtoto ameingia hata chakula nyumbani hakupata. Mtoto anasinzia yuko pale, hata shika vipi elimu? Nani mtoto Mkenya ana haki katika katiba ya Kenya kupata elimu ya msingi bila kubughudhiwa Mheshimiwa Spika. Sheria ilitoka kuwa watoto wote waingie shuleni wasome bure. Lakini mbona watoto wa mitaa mabanda ambao shule iko mbali, haijajengwa shule karibu yake, lakini kuna wale ambao wamejitolelea wakasema wacha sisi tutatoa elimu kwa hawa watoto tukiweza kuwatayarisha hapo mbele vile watakavyokuwa. Lazima serikali iweke mkono katika elimu ya hawa watoto. Huenda ikawa tuna rais ambaye yasoma katika shule ya mabanda Mheshimiwa Spika, huenda ikawa kuna daktari amepotea pale ndoto zake katika shule ya mitaa ya mabanda Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini kwa vile hana mwanya wa kuingia katika mfumo halisi wa Kenya wa shule Mheshimiwa Spika, ndoto za yule mtoto zinapotea. Watoto wengi tunapata, wengi wameingia wamekuwa wezi, wamekuwa majambazi. Mtoto anakuambia mimi nilisoma lakini sikuweza kupata certificate kwa sababu nilisoma mtaa wa mabanda. Najua kuandika, najua kusoma, lakini si kuingia kwa mfumo wa kawaida kwa sababu ya hali ya umaskini Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo mimi nataka kusema maskini yoyote ndani ya Kenya ama fukara, isiwe sababu ya ufukara wake hawezi kupata elimu, hawezi kupata matibabu, hawezi kuangaliwa vizuri Mheshimiwa Spika. Na ndio maana mimi napigia upato hii bill ambayo imeletwa na ndugu yetu Mheshimiwa Loch kuwa hii mitaa mabanda na elimu ya msingi watoto wa mabanda lazima waangaliwe vizuri, wapewe equal rights kama watoto wengine wa Kenya Mheshimiwa Spika. Na Mheshimiwa amesema mambo ya zoning, mimi nasema toka baba afe tunateseka, lakini Mungu yuko na sisi. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Hayo mambo ya zoning ni kama inawasumbua, lakini sisi tutashughulika na ya Oluoch na ya watoto wa kule Mathare, wa Kibira. Haya ndio yameletwa katika bunge na Mheshimiwa Oloch leo. Mheshimiwa Didmas Baraza, mbunge wa Kimilili.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Let me first begin by thanking the Member of Parliament for Mathare, the Honorable Wakili Anthony Oluoch. Madam Speaker, the reason why we are elected by Kenyans is to identify public problems.
Order, members. Is it because of zoning that the whole zone? I mean, this zoning seems to be very problematic because the whole row on my left is extremely loud. Please consult in lower tones about this zoning so that we can do the business of today. Please proceed.
I think, Madam Speaker, they are consulting on high note because that law is unconstitutional. There are more ladies than men, and maybe we should also try to think about going forward. Madam Speaker.
The of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is the Honourable Member in order to suggest that Honourable Jalaj, Honourable Elisha, Honourable, who is this? Azio Mutuse, Fabian, Honourable Anthony, and the Oundo and the rest are women? Are you in order? Because it says majority are women, but the women are only 3. So if the majority are women, then it means all these people here are women. Is it in order to imply that the men in the house are women? Or does he have a problem with his eyes? I know he's wearing glasses, but Madam Speaker, you can help him so that he can have better vision.
Member for Kimilili, that is a very serious matter. So what did you see that made you decide that all those members that have been mentioned by name, by the leader, minority side. What is your comment on that?
I didn't say parliament, I said the row. The row means from where Fabian is to where the district member from Rusinga Island. So that is what on a right note, Madam Speaker. Nonetheless, Madam Speaker, let me come back to the business of that are before us. That I want to say that the reason why leaders are elected is to identify public problems and provide solutions so that the people should not continue suffering, Madam Speaker. Honorable Anthony Oluoch has established that indeed there is a problem where Kenyans who happen to come from informal settlement have nowhere to access better education, and that they have improvised the areas where they come from by identifying spaces where they call schools. Madam Speaker, we live in a country where everybody understands that education is an equalizer of the society. And I will be willing to improve this bill so that those children can no longer continue to suffer. Because we cannot introduce divisions in education, Madam Speaker, where we say that those who can afford better learning institutions, fully funded by government, supported by government, continues to do so, but those who come from informal settlement, who cannot access those good schools, but they have improvised structures where they call schools that will continue to legitimize where they sit and learn, Madam Speaker. That is not the way to go, Madam Speaker. The same way this country has evolved. When I was growing up, Madam Speaker, there was no single tarmac in Rusinga Island, but today if you go to Rusinga Island, there is tarmac. I am optimistic that those informal settlements, where the young people have no access to proper education, that a time will come, those informal settlements will be eliminated and the better schools will be put up, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need to continue having a conversation. While we are aware that those students cannot access the better primary schools, Madam Speaker, but can the government of Kenya provide transport? Can we therefore say that every single morning we provide the BRT systems are provided for in informal settlement, where those young people can board those BRT, can get buses, be taken to schools that are far from where they are, Madam Speaker. We cannot continue allowing them, saying that they can continue to learn from where they are learning. There are only two pathways to higher learning in this country, Madam Speaker. One pathway is to follow the government, the CBC system, where they're enrolled in ECDE, then they go to comprehensive primary schools, then they go to senior secondary schools, then they can go to the university, Madam Speaker. The other way is to follow the British system, the international system, the international curriculum system, Madam Speaker, where they go even up to Form 6, or whichever way it's called, Madam Speaker. But we cannot introduce another system that is parallel to the existing system, Madam Speaker. Those APEC schools, the one that Honorable Anthony Oloch want to regularize, they have no teachers. The teachers who are teaching there, some of them are not qualified as per the specifications of, that one has to satisfy to be for him or her to be a teacher in this school, Madam Speaker. Number two, the space doesn't qualify to be called a school. So we cannot continue disadvantaging those students, disadvantaging those children of Kenya, that because the proper school is far from wherever they are. An alternative means of transport must be provided to transport these students from their home, from their informal settlement, to a place where they will compete favorably and equitably to the rest of the students in Kenya, Madam Speaker. We cannot continue to allow certain children of Kenya go to purchase the education in proper schools, in proper public schools that are well funded by government, where the government has provided proper infrastructure and support for them to learn, Madam Speaker. And then we have others whom we are trying to regularize, that we regularize and recognize the Mabati space that they are learning and they are calling school, that they should continue learning from those institutions, Madam Speaker. We will be creating divisions. We will be creating classes within the learning fraternity, Madam Speaker. All we need to do is we must improve this bill and compel the government either to build proper schools within those informal settlements or provide a free means of transport where these children can be carried every day from morning and in the evening to proper schools, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I know that the role of government is to provide solutions to public problems. These public problems can also be provided. A solution can be provided in a structured manner, not in a manner that you accept that, yes, these students, they have a right to learn. And they are learning from makeshift structures. They are learning from classrooms that don't even meet qualifications of being classrooms. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, this bill must be improved to include closing down all those institutions that are called learning institutions, but they don't meet the qualifications. And those learners should be taken to schools, to institutions that are properly constituted, that have got the proper facilities, so that we do not continue to disadvantage the children of our country going forward, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, lastly, in the same manner, we usually change very many laws in this country. The government always brings in this house what we call omnibus bills to change very many things. All those laws must be anchored, must be premised on the need to provide solutions for the very many existing public problems. Honorable Speaker, I want to appreciate and laud the Honorable Member for Mathare for coming up with this bill. I will sit down with the Honorable Member for Mathare to refine this bill to ensure that no part of this country has her children marginalized because of where they come from, or rather because of the economic status of their parent. I support this bill, Madam Speaker, of course with amendments. I support.
Thank you. The Honorable Phyllis Bato, Member for Moiben.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to take this opportunity to make my contribution and to thank the Member of Parliament for bringing, Honorable Anthony Olwatch, for bringing this amendment to the floor of the House. Madam Speaker, I was one of those people who were not very supportive of this bill at the beginning when it came to the Education Committee until we went round some of the schools in Kibra constituency and I became a convert. Madam Speaker, education, basic education is very important to every child. And it shouldn't matter where the capitation or the support by government gets a student, whether in private, whether in public, whether in informal settlement, and so on. The most important thing is the value for this money to that particular student. Is it going to transform the life of that student to get better education? That should be the question. So it doesn't matter where you are, where you are schooling, but the most important thing is that is this education which is inculcated in you making meaning? Is it improving your life? Is it transforming your life? And so on. So I support this bill. However, it shouldn't be that government is going to start supporting private enterprises, that I decide today as Mheshimiwa Barto, go to a slum, identify a niche, and I decide this is where I want to put up a school so that I can benefit from government money. It should be structured in a way that there is no, it should be, the schools should be clearly identified so that we don't participate in creating businesses for people at the expense of provision of education. And it should be limited to those informal settlements, not just anybody, because in our rural areas, for instance, Madam Speaker, like in my constituency now, I have so many public schools which are almost closing because there are no students. There are facilities, but we no longer have students. I don't know where they went to. So you should know, we should be able to make a very clear demarcation on these update schools, which ones, where are they, and the line officials in the ministry should not just be sitting in their offices, but they should be going around to make sure that they are registered well, they are run in the best way possible, just like any other school. And even those who are struggling to register, Madam Speaker, we have a problem in this country where when you are employed, you sit in an office and you wait for people to come and look for you to do registration and so on. The Ministry of Education should be sending their field officers to the field to go and compound these schools, make sure that children are not disenfranchised, to make sure that they are in proper schools, so that we don't have cases of students sit in a school for a season, and when it comes to registration for examination, they realize that they are not registered by National Examination Council, and it becomes a crisis. So it is a very noble idea. And it is not just in education, even in our justice system. Nowadays, we have alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. The judiciary is really encouraging, and it is training people on that field. That is an indication that it is not just enough to always do the recognized way, the formal way. We should also fast-track our education by looking at other alternative ways of provision of education, so long as the end justifies the means, so long as the end, we make sure that our children get education, just like judiciary, so long as the end, somebody gets proper justice. And I think this is a very good idea. it should also, the registration of these schools should also be captured in the national data system. The Ministry of Education started with NAMIS, now they are also dealing with KEMI. So they should be able to document each and every learner. And when this capitation is provided to these students, proper auditing should be done so that, you know, human beings sometimes can be cheeky, so that someone cannot just take the money, pocket, and there is nothing, there is no value for this particular child, in this in this particular environment, so that it is not going to be abused. The other day we were having a meeting with the heads of the vice chancellors from private university, and they were presenting pending bills for the money, the government owes the money for students who were admitted in private universities, but somehow the government was not able to pay, and then the pending bill keeps on rising. At the beginning, when we met them in 2023, the pending bills were at 32 billion. The other day when they were coming to make their case, it had risen to 90 billion. So it should be very well structured so that we don't create a problem, we don't try to solve a problem, and then on the other hand, we are creating another problem. Just like now, we have stopped sending private students, government students, to private universities, unlike in the past where you would choose which university you would want to enroll, and then the government will provide the capitation to you wherever you are. So it became very messy to an extent that it created inequity and inequality. It was a process of trying to provide higher education for our children, but now it created, it started zoning. Somebody say, let me say, quote unquote zoning. It started marginalizing other students, because you can imagine you are admitted to a private university, but the standards of this private university are not commensurate with what happens in public universities, and then they start charging an extra fee, and then from there, the students get this disadvantage, and you become marginalized, and marginalization begins from there, and you get marginalized all the way. And even as we speak today, we still have students, government students in private universities who have not been able to progress. They have had to defer their studies. Some have had they have had to defer their studies because the government did not meet its side of the bargain. It did not pay the fees, unlike in government universities where it's government to government, so it can be agreed that as long as it's still government, the government will still pay. It remains there as a pending bill. But you know, private universities is a private business. You bring the money, or you ship in, or you shape up, or you ship out. So I wish that we regulate, we put a very good regulation mechanism so that these students benefit from that environment without struggling, because we cannot, some of those schools are in the population density in such environments is so high, and the students are so eager. You know, we visited there, and by the time, Madam Speaker, we finished our exercise, as I said before, I became a convert. So I want to thank Honorable Olwach and congratulations for bringing this very progressive amendment to the Education Act. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Millie Odhiambo, member for Suba North and Minority Leadership.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Anthony Olwach for bringing this bill, which is an amendment to the Basic Education Act. And just want to also say that I do support, of course, albeit with reservations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you look at the proposed amendments, it actually is one of the challenges that I've had to face, one as a human rights practitioner and lawyer, and also as a development practitioner, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I joined Parliament, even though I'm a lawyer, I've worked primarily with communities. And Madam Speaker, in the process of working with communities, I had, of course, an opportunity to work with a lot of people in the informal settlements of this country, especially around the Nairobi area. And Madam Speaker, having also joined, as a member of Parliament, I've had to deal with some of the stuck, realities relating to poverty. And Madam Speaker, sometimes I find a disconnect between us, those of us who may be seen to be privileged, or those of us who may have gone through formal education systems, or those who, are advantaged in society in one way or another, especially the ones who we call elite. And sometimes there are days I used to argue with people on social media, and at some point I just say, let them be, they'll understand. Madam Speaker, this is actually the conversation that we've also been having, especially in relation to NGCDF. And some of people, like my civil society friends, Madam Speaker, sometimes when we discuss with them and they tell you, as a member of Parliament, your role is legislation, representation, and oversight. And they say stick to those roles strictly and don't get into those spaces. So I tell them, okay, so when I go to my constituency and I find people who are suffering, what do you tell them? They say, tell them your roles, until you tell them the realities, stark realities that you face with. Madam Speaker, there's a case I like sharing about a lady. One time when I was actually campaigning, and then I met her, people told me there is, a lady who has died up the hill, and they said, please go and visit the family to look very back into your campaigning, and there's somebody who has died. And so I went up the hill, and there is no means of transport, so we had to walk up. We couldn't even go by a motorbike. And when we reached up the hill, Madam Speaker, it was a mud-walled house. The woman was lying on the floor. There was no bed. She was covered with a net that had been donated by UNICEF. Madam Speaker, that is a kind of abject poverty that we deal with as members of Parliament. Now, when I go to a situation like that, where is the time to tell that person that it's my oversight role? And all they want to do, and the firstborn child was 14 years. Another case, Madam Speaker, while I was also campaigning, I was told by the community there is this lady who is sick and needs some support to get health care. And sometimes I contribute a little and people think we give from CDF. That kind of thing is not provided by CDF. I get it from my pocket. And I gave her some real modest money to go to hospital. The community told me, Mheshimiwa, the money you'll give this lady will not help. Let her walk to you. And this lady walked to me and removed her blouse. And she had a rotten breast. There was pus succeed, unfortunately. It's only later that now this guy was also involved in some money laundering scam that the police then were able to look for him. Madam Speaker, this is the tragedy of trying to balance equality and human rights standards with the reality you face on the ground. But Madam Speaker, there is an answer if you look at this bill that under Article 10.2 of the Constitution talks about issue of human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, non-discrimination amongst and protection of the marginalized. So there are aspects of equality here, but there's also the issue of protection of the marginalized. And if you look also at Article 27.6, it calls on us as Parliament to provide legislative action to ensure affirmative action for such groups. And sometimes, Madam Speaker, in trying to get people to the level that others are, we may actually then provide standards that are not equal. And it is actually a challenge that we are facing as a country. That's why, Madam Speaker, I am a lawyer, but I've gone back to study development studies, because I just want to understand this complex nature of poverty. Why are we not breaking through? Why are we putting so much energy? Why have I been here 18 years? And we make steps forward and then we make steps backward. Why can't we hack it as African countries? Why can't we change, Madam Speaker? But I want to say that I'm glad that we are seeing in countries where change is already eminent, like in Ethiopia, even though they are also facing other challenges, you know, human rights related challenges. But in terms of development, they are actually making a huge difference within only 6 years. Madam Speaker, I've seen it in Rwanda as well. They are also facing certain issues, Madam Speaker, of human rights in nature. But in terms of even development of infrastructure and equalizing opportunities, that is already happening in Rwanda. What I would call on us as Kenya, and I would urge our president to do, that we need to push the hardware, which I'm seeing the president is trying to do very strongly. Like in my constituency, he recently commissioned a tarmac on Rusinga Ring Road. And you know, many people say that it is actually not reality. It is reality. We have tarmac in Rusinga Island. But I'd want to challenge or encourage our president that let us push the hardware, but at the same time push the software. And software is issues of human rights, issues of equity, issues of equality, so that even as we are moving on with the infrastructure, let us not leave all these other issues of human rights and you know, protection of the marginalized behind. Madam Speaker, with that in mind, I would want to just thank Honorable Anthony, and I want to say I understand you and I feel you, especially those who work in areas of informal settlements. I have a place in my own constituency called Kongeche, and Kongeche is actually an informal settlement. And many of the people in Kongeche sometimes are unable to access the basic education that we talked about. Even though it is meant to be free, there are always hidden costs. Some of the hidden costs are, of course, uniform. Some of those kids cannot afford uniform, even though the president recently said that children can now go without uniform. And I know many people were attacking it. But in reality, that is sometimes where we need to go before we get to the level where we want to go to, Madam Speaker. And I'd want to encourage that let us work very hard, that we make sure we reach Canaan. Let us copy and not necessarily go to Singapore, but copy Singapore, copy Rwanda, copy Ethiopia, but with addition of putting emphasis on the issues on the software as well as the hardware of development, so that when we are assessing our success, it's not only in terms of infrastructure, but also human development. I do support, because I see my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Beatrice Adagala, member for Vihiga County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Also, to congratulate my Honorable MP for Mathare, Honorable Lodge, for coming up with this amendment on the basic education. Madam Speaker, onset, basic education is supposed to be free for all Kenyans, despite whether they are staying in informal or formal settlements, and even in villages. Madam Speaker, this amendment is timely. I think I'll have to support. When you come to our villages, I want to talk about the village where I come from, my county. We have cases, Madam Speaker, whereby most of the children are not accessible to education, and the education that is supposed to be free, which we all know that education is an equalizer, and every Kenyan student, child, or every Kenyan person who is supposed to get education must get it in whatever way. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans are supposed to be in school. When you go to some of these areas in our villages, I want to speak of a case whereby recently a young person was denied to register for examination because of not having a birth certificate. Because they were trying to say that that child is overage. And some of these parents, even some of them have never been to school, they don't understand the dates the children were born. And it's not the mistake of these children to be denied to sit for examination. Madam Speaker, I think this bill, it should not just be for informal settlements within towns like Nairobi here in Kibra, Mathare, and so forth. It should extend up to the villages. I think even the education committee should go up to our villages to ensure all these our children are going to school. Our children don't have birth certificates. Okay, in some cases, like where Barasa comes from, Honorable Barasa comes from, names are gotten on roads, names are given when people are doing certain culture things, but now you find such a child may not have a birth certificate. This is really hampering our children from getting the basic education that is needed when they go to register as students or as during examination time. They are sent home that they should produce birth certificates, which they don't have. And you'll find such a child may not register for examination, and it will reach a place where they are already 20 or 25, they want to register, they can't register. But like the scenario, the case I'm trying to talk about, this child in Vihiga, the education office intervened, and at 22 years, he has registered for his examination, which I may recommend them for the intervention. Madam Speaker, what Honorable Locha has put here, this needs to be done. If you go to other jurisdictions, like in Ghana, you go to Ethiopia, it is working. Why should it not work in Kenya? You know, it is not uniforms. Maybe if also
we are in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, education is a key indicator of human resource and development index. And there's no country can develop when it has a low, low human development index. And a country with low income, low development index has a low economic growth. Therefore, there's a need to have a proper and strong basic education for population so that the population can get skills for all sectors. And therefore, the country can experience economic growth. Basic education should be actually a basic need for each and every student, be it in the formal sector or in the formal sector. And it's very important to look at the whole bill. Apart from the amendment, I think there are so many gaps in the Basic Education Act which need to be looked at. Mapping of schools is very important. And I always think funding of the schools, even the CDF, because biggest chunk of the funds, CDF funds, goes to the schools. And I believe most of the funding of CDF, the allocation of CDF should be based on schools. The issue of registration, Madam Speaker, is not an issue of informal sector alone. The requirement to register a school is one of them is the school should have a title deed for the land. And I'm just wondering, because even myself, I'm registering some schools, and this is a requirement. The school should have a title deed. And I'm just wondering, if I have a problem in Kitui Rural, what about informal settlement? What about informal settlement? And if there's no title deed, that school cannot be registered. So is it important to have that as a condition to register school? I think to me it's not. And that requirement should be removed as we move forward, so that these schools can be registered and kids can learn. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know these schools in the formal sector, they're in the slums. They're in slums, and slums, you know, these are low-income people. People who don't even have cannot meet their basic needs. This is where the people are living below poverty line. This is where the areas where people cannot have 3 meals in a day. And therefore, we really need to look at how we are going to address the issues of informal sector. For example, Madam Speaker, there is what we call infrastructure fund, education infrastructure fund, which is not transferred. I don't know how that fund is being distributed. We need to address that issue, so that each and every, if this money, it is there, the first charge should go to informal sector, so that we can help them to fund the infrastructure. Madam Speaker, capitation has been a challenge. You talk to the schools, I think they are getting 16,000 instead of 22,000. Up to now, I think they own billions of shillings. And each and every school is complaining that they cannot provide the requirement for the schools. In fact, you talk to the teachers, they say it's only the bursaries we give which are helping them to survive, because the capitation for a long time has not been forthcoming for the school. So we also need to look at the capitation, how the capitation is being given. The funding of education, we need to address it. If we have to get proper education, the funding of the education, it has to be addressed. Let us not cheat ourselves that we are giving capitation and we are giving half of it. Should be full. Madam Speaker, books to this informal sector is very important. I think I was talking to the teachers, and they are saying even the books for grade 10, they have not received them. Our class has like 3 books. You know, these are the issues which we need to address. And of course, the feeding program. I said that the informal sector settlements, these are whereby even the families, they cannot actually eat 3 meals in a day. So imagine a kid who has not eaten and is in school, how is that kid is going to perform? And at the end of the day, that pupil is going to sit the same exams with somebody in the formal sector and be provided everything. So the country need to address the issues of informal sector and let them be given NIMIS so that they can get capitation. They can be able to do exams, because if you have no NIMIS, and imagine a student who is in informal school and is not even sure he's going to sit for exams, you know, the dropout rates in the informal sector are very high. These are the issues which we need to address. And Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I support. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Wilberforce Oundo, member for Funyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to likewise contribute or comment on the Basic Education Amendment Bill 2025, sponsored by my ODM colleague, Honorable Anthony Oluoch, of our constituency here in Nairobi. Honorable Speaker, the Constitution of Kenya makes it compulsory for basic education. Constitution of Kenya requires that children must be given all they require for them to go through and make it in life. Honorable Speaker, there has been so many impediments to basic education in this country, and successive governments have tried to address those challenges. But many other challenges still remain, and the proposal by Honorable Anthony Oluoch is one of those solutions to so many challenges that still abound in this country. Honorable Speaker, I've just had an engagement with him. I did not know this problem was that serious. I did not know the problem was that serious in informal settlements. But Honorable Speaker, there are practical challenges to the implementation of this bill once it's enacted and becomes law. And let me start from the basics. Informal settlement has defied formal definition for many years, because informality is only described by formality. When you look at the various papers or position papers by UN Habitat, the housing policy, and the rest, they find they have avoided in all their discussion any reference to informal settlement. Because and settlements are settlement, they can only be declared informal by any executive order or government. So that becomes a very big challenge. How do we conceptualize, how do we find informal settlements? Second, Honorable Speaker, informal settlement is not a permanent position. It's the expectation of anybody who lives in the so-called informal settlement that one day they'll get out of that informal settlement. In any case, any successful government that comes along always says they'll fight poverty. They'll deal with urban poverty. So I do believe informal settlement is not a permanent edict, and it must be defined clearly to avoid ambiguity and abuse. In any case, Honorable Speaker, with the ongoing affordable housing, targeting the mamamboga, the so-called hustlers, I do believe with the time, theoretically, the informal settlement culture or informal settlement will be something in our history books. Honorable Speaker, the government has a lot of money for infrastructure. And that's why we must question why they have not addressed this matter. Honorable Speaker, the danger of this bill, and I do believe the proposer or the sponsor, Honorable Oluoch, will allow for further debate, comes in the definition of alternative provision for basic education training, means institution offering basic education curriculum in informal settlements. Honorable Speaker, it goes further to say, part government will provide infrastructure for all schools, including alternative provision of basic education training schools, learning and teaching equipment, and appropriate financial resources. Honorable Speaker, we need to be very clear. Are these alternative provision of basic education or schools in formal settlements, are they public institutions? Are they private institutions? Or where does it fall? Because indeed, it will be misuse of public resources for government to provide infrastructure in private institutions. So Honorable Oluoch will have to assist us, clearly redefine what are these alternative provision of basic education and training to avoid abuse. Many of my colleagues here have stated, many unscrupulous Kenyans will go all over in the pretext of getting money from public funds, start so-called informal schools, and come and seek the government government funds to run the same. Honorable Speaker, the bill also provides that one of the functions of the Education Board is advise the national government on waiver of registration requirements, including documents of title for alternative provision of basic education and training schools as the circumstances may demand. One of the questions we need to ask here, if you can only identify a location in this country either by georeferencing or by a land title, if we waiver that requirement, if a case of corruption has occurred, how will we ever trace the owners of that school? So that's why this debate is very nice. It has thrust into the national limelight the challenges of informal schools, schools in informal settlements, but we need to continuously look at this bill, how we can make it better to avoid embezzlement of public funds, and to remove the stigma from the children who go through these schools, that they'll feel inferior in the eyes of the others.
Member for Funyula,
yes.
I would like to encourage the Honorable Oluoch to just take a lot of keen interest in the points that have been raised by so many members, including Professor. Yeah, because people are talking about the issue of title deeds. The issue of these children in marginalized areas finding themselves being more marginalized because someone wants to take advantage and start a so-called an informal school. The fact that they're being funded, and they're being funded up to the age of 18, as you have indicated. So I think these are issues that when you are doing your response, because you'll get that opportunity, you can share, and also ensure that it comes out strongly in the amendments so that it can be more acceptable. Because we want these children to be at par with other children, not to be pulled back to the slums where they belong. You may proceed, Professor.
Thank you. That's actually the point of concern. Education must improve you. But if you are stigmatized, I remember, Honorable Speaker, when the parallel degree programs were being introduced at the universities, I was a lecturer in at the university, of course. I couldn't have been anywhere else. Do you see, they would come with a registration number that indicates they're parallel. They're not regular. So that fact alone was a big demotivator. I mean, that's why it ran into so many challenges, and many of the universities had to discontinue and just go through the formal way. Honorable Speaker, as I said, let's continue this debate. But as we speak here today, Honorable Speaker, there are two issues that are emerging. I was in my constituency on a certain function on Monday. A school of about 500 learners enrolled is only about 100 who have got birth certificates. And it's only those 100 that appears in NEMIS. So you find a school has got close to 500 learners, but they only get capitation for only 100 learners. That disadvantages the school, makes it impossible to run the programs. I want to urge the government that they must find a rapid initiative to ensure children being born are granted birth certificates without any discrimination, without asking any questions. Because a child born in Kenya becomes a Kenyan, should be given a birth certificate regardless of whatever the circumstances of their parents. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of capitation, the government promised free education. Free education can only happen if there is adequate capitation. You do not promise 22,000 and only deliver 17,000. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support, but with reservations.
Thank you. The Honorable Esther Passaris, member for Nairobi County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the Basic Amendment, Education Amendment Bill 2025. And I commend my brother, Honorable Anthony Olwoch, Member of Parliament for Mathare constituency, for bringing this timely and progressive amendment. Madam Speaker, this bill, this amendment speaks directly to the realities that we face, that are faced by many learners in the informal settlements and other marginalized settings which remain outside the formal education grid. Madam Speaker, the bill seeks to bring learners currently outside the education system into a formal framework through mapping, registration, and funding of alternative provisions for basic education and training institutions. Article 27 of our Constitution guarantees equality and freedom from discrimination. We must not discriminate against learners simply because they attend schools in informal settlements or non-formal settings. Every child has a right to education, dignity, and equal opportunity. The bill, therefore, corrects an injustice by ensuring that learners in these institutions are recognized, captured within the national education system. Madam Speaker, we must also commend the resilience, entrepreneurship, and social spirit of the communities that have established and sustained these schools. In very difficult circumstances, parents, teachers, faith-based groups, community leaders have come together to ensure their children continue learning. These institutions are not a failure of the system. They are a response to the communities determined to give their children a future. That resilience and innovation should be recognized, supported, and strengthened. Having said that, urbanization, which is a topic that's being discussed right now at the Africa Urban Forum that's being held at KICC. Kenya is hosting the second Africa Urban Forum. We are realizing that the urbanization is real. Increased population is real. Demand is real. So when you look at the informal settlements, I mean, right now we are in a mad rush to ensure that we give dignity to families in terms of housing. But in the same strength, we have to recognize that in those informal settlements, we have learning facilities that are giving our children, and I tell you, quite a number have come out and gone on to university, come out and gone on to masters, come out and are actually contributing to our society. Had they not had that opportunity to study in those informal settlements, we would be in a bigger problem than we're having today. So once mapped and registered, these schools can receive support that they require. Many of these learners are coming from very vulnerable backgrounds and face multiple barriers. Some go to school hungry. And you know, right now in Nairobi, we celebrate the Dishina County program by the Nairobi County, but it focuses only on public schools. Community-based schools are our children. Faith-based schools are our children. So if they are going hungry because of the setup in which they are studying, then we obviously are discriminating against them and we are going against the Constitution. So we must ensure that feeding programs extend to these institutions because a hungry child cannot concentrate in class. Further, there are many schools that lack trained teachers. As I went around Nairobi this Easter weekend giving food to orphanages, I found quite a number of orphanages have actually created learning centers within because they cannot afford. First of all, they have so many challenges. One, most of the orphans that are in those institutions have been brought in by the police and social services, the chiefs, and they do not have birth certificates, or they have ongoing court cases. And because of that, and because the orphanages are not supported fully by government, what happens is the orphanage has the child, is not getting enough resources, has no birth certificate for the child, and cannot afford to take that child to a formal school because they can barely afford to pay the rent of the facility that they are offering. So what happens is that this child will miss an education and will have nothing to do the whole day. So the orphanage has decided, let us create some kind of structure. But they don't have teachers. They don't have the money to pay the ones that they hire. They don't have the money to buy school books. They don't have the money to make sure that the children can have uniforms to go to school if they engage them in school. So we do have a critical problem. And I believe that, you know, every problem, once you come up with a law that addresses that problem, we then allow the government to think through providing budgets. So I know, or as it is right now, we struggle with capitation, even in the schools that we are supposed to give capitation. But, you know, Rome was not built in a day. And I believe that the dreams that we have for our country, envisioned by our forefathers and those who fought for freedom, right, did not envision the rapid growth that we're experiencing in not just Kenya, but in Africa. And the failure from independence to address some of these issues, and now we are reaching a point where it's hitting us in the face that we have got to move fast. And for that, I'm really appreciative of the president and the role that he's playing and the tough decisions that he's making. When it comes to sanitary towels, we as GAF, we provide sanitary towels only for public schools, and also within the public schools only for certain classes. So we cannot cover everyone. We probably cover grades 6 to 9, but what about secondary? All right. What about community-based schools? What about faith-based schools? So we do have a critical crisis in the country where resources are limited, but that should not stop us putting in a law in place. Because once we put the law in place, then when we do our planning, and you know, we're looking forward to the next census, it will tell us and inform us that we do have a crisis, and I hope that then we will start thinking family planning. Because no country can grow to an extent that its resources cannot be able to sustain it. So for me, Madam Speaker, as I look at this, the funding should support improved classrooms. Our president recently gave Nairobi 1 billion shillings, but that went only into public schools. Some of the schools that our children are learning in the informal settlements, when it rains, the children cannot hear. When it rains, the children have leaking roofs. So can we look at the infrastructure fund, recognizing that in certain areas already we have congestion? Like in Roysambo, I came across an informal school, and that informal school tells me that the classrooms nearby are 100+ students. And then on top of it, there's an entry fee, which I'm going to be looking at as soon as the school opens. So we do have problems. So the issuance of NEMIS numbers will also be very important. Because once we give NEMIS numbers to all the students, all the learners, then we get to understand what we need to do in terms of our planning. How much money do we need to put in education? I've always been a supporter of scrapping bursaries and making sure that bursaries goes into the fund to ensure that we provide free education for all. Because I find that discriminatory as well, because some will reach you, others will not. So for me, I feel that even right now, as we have it, right, we should be thinking, what is the cost? What is the cost of providing education for every child in this country? And once we know that, we will then be able to budget and understand whether we are budgeting enough. We will then be able to say, okay, we've hired 100,000 teachers, but maybe what we need is 200,000 teachers. All these requires funding and money. But for us to have that money, right, we need to address the big elephant in the room, corruption. And I know from the former president to the current president, corruption is something that happens with citizens who've been entrusted with public office to do good for the country. And I want to tell all those that are engaging in corrupt practices, remember that this country has put you in office to serve its citizens. And as you steal resources and plan to enrich yourself, remember, this is the only country you're going to live in. And when the people get too hungry and they have nothing to eat and they lose all hope, then your wealth and whatever it is you've accumulated doing the wrong thing is not going to help you. So we need to understand that everything that we need to budget for in this country, inclusion, dignity, that no child is left behind, that they have the kind of schools that we want to be proud of, can only happen when we address corruption. I thank you, Madam Speaker. I support and I thank Honorable Anthony Oroch for bringing this important bill to the House. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Mary Amase, Member for Teso South.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important bill From the onset, I want to congratulate Honorable Watch for bringing forth this amendment, Basic Education Amendment Bill 2025. Honorable Speaker, this bill is very important because education is a right to every child. But for a long time, access and affordability have remained a challenge to many of the children in this country. Honorable Speaker, I used to hear about up-bet schools. That's the alternative provision of basic education, but I never understood what it meant. Honorable Speaker, sometimes we take certain issues for granted. It took me, as a member of the Education Committee, it took a visit to Kibra constituency when we visited a number of these schools for me to be able to appreciate what children in those areas go through when it comes to accessibility and affordability of education. Honorable Speaker, this bill, I'm very happy about this bill because this bill is seeking to ensure that these schools are recognized, that there is mapping, there is recognition, there is registration, and there is provision of benefits that are enjoyed by all other schools to these schools for the benefit of these children. Honorable Speaker, when we visited these schools, we realized that these schools have very limited resources. They are overcrowded, they are understaffed. Some of them even have security concerns in terms of the safety of the children, Honorable Speaker. Some of them have untrained teachers. They have inadequate desks. They have inadequate space. The population is more than the number of schools. But because of the poverty levels in those areas, the parents cannot afford to take them to the formal schools. Actually, most of them leave them at home. And some of these well-wishers who have started these informal setups for training and educating these kids have to literally go to the homes and pick them from the homes from their parents so that they can be able to provide them with basic education. But Honorable Speaker, the only concern I have, just like my colleagues who have spoken, the bill must be very clear and specific to allow for seamless implementation so that there is a clear distinction between private and up-bet schools, so that an individual is not running a private school and seeking to benefit from public resources for personal advantage. Probably these schools must be defined clearly as public schools, because when you're talking about receiving benefits from national government, we are talking about employing teachers for up-bet schools. Madam Speaker, we are talking about building infrastructure in these schools. We are talking about providing capitation to these children. So those schools must be properly defined as public schools for them to be able to draw the benefits like any other formal school. But otherwise, Honorable Speaker, I support this bill. Is timely, it is overdue. Some of us in the rural areas, we have schools, but the challenges we have may be just to provide sufficient infrastructure. But I know we have schools in the rural setups that do not even have enough students. But in these informal setups, the situation is different. They don't have almost everything. They need to be supported, and the poverty is very high. So these schools must be supported, and this bill is timely, and we must support it. We may make amendments, but we must support this bill, Honorable Speaker. I support. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Nyenze, member for Kitui Rural. And honorable members, I realize that there are some of you seated, and your cards may not be reflecting, as that is the case for the Honorable Nyenze. And I would like to find out from the Honorable Carolio Mondi, is your card, did you insert your card? Yeah, because we also cannot view your name on the screen. You may proceed, member for Kitui West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Let me, on the onset, congratulate
Honorable Antona Oluochi, Member of Parliament Mathare, for bringing this amendment bill. And this one is in the effort to bridge the education gaps, that is on the mapping, on registering and funding schools in informal settlements. And actually, if this one is done, it will be a game changer for these children. And this would even enable the country to bring most of the children on the education, in the education sector. Children have a constitutional and a fundamental right, human right to free and compulsory and quality education without any discrimination. And actually, this one is governed by the Constitution in Article 53 of our Constitution. And also, it's also governed by Education Act of 2013. And this act prohibits discrimination and also other things like child labor, and ensures that encourages free and compulsory primary education, and also accessibility and non-discrimination, and also quality. It also encourages quality to safety and quality to good life. Madam Speaker, I note that these children in the informal sector have very many challenges. They have many challenges, some of them which include, they are limited, or they have no access to schools or good schools. There is inadequate infrastructure, inky classrooms, toilets. There is lack of resources like textbooks, and also they do not have adequate teachers, because these teachers in the community or in the faith-based schools, the parents are the ones who pay for their own teachers. And this, because of poverty, you find that the number of teachers in some of these schools is inadequate. So they also have other challenges like high dropout rates due to poverty and also insecurity. And if there is high dropout in such settlements, that encourages also insecurity in our country and in these areas. And also hopelessness in our youth and in our people. Other difficulties is getting registered for exams or accessing government support becomes a challenge to such schools which are in informal settlements. These children are often left behind, and it's actually very heartbreaking to see that they are discriminated from the other children, even though we know that education is the only equalizer. That's why initiatives like these ones for amending the Constitution, the bill from Oluochi, will bring them into the system and give them a fighting chance so that they are bearable and they are compared with the other children. Madam Speaker, children in informal settlements to get access to education and also to the education system is very difficult. And as I've talked about the challenges, then you find that such schools have issues of title deeds. They do not have title deeds, so they cannot be registered as public schools. They also can't fit into the private schools because private schools are very expensive. So that's why they just go to community-based schools, to faith-based schools, where they are not registered for even exams, or where they are not even given capitation. Madam Speaker, some of the solutions to this, we may not have all the solutions, but I'm sure since when it's put in the Constitution, when it's put as an act in the Basic Education Act, this one will be considered and such problems will be sorted. Madam Speaker, of late we have been doing affordable housing These affordable housing are all over in our country, and I would suggest that such housing facilities should even be considered for such schools, for community schools, so that they are given such as public, since they have no title deeds. These schools, in their community schools and faith-based schools, should be considered, because this one is a very great need. They should be considered in this program of affordable housing and be given housing, be given infrastructure, so that they have somewhere where they can be registered as a school, which can be registered as a school, so that they get capitation, so that they get teachers, they get their names, and this would sort some of the problems. Madam Speaker, in my constituency, there is a problem which has arisen, especially this financial year, where some schools have not been registered from grade 7. And why is this so? It's because the population has become very low. Why? Because most of the children are going to private schools. I have some private schools in my constituency. And I'm sure some of the members of parliament are also experiencing such in their constituencies. So what does this mean? If you have about 10 schools which are not registered for grade 7, that means with the time, these schools will just die out. They will not be there because parents will not take children to schools which do not have grade 7. But we have put so much infrastructure through the CDF. So government infrastructure, government resources will be wasted. So because there's devolution, I know there is a movement to urban areas. Urbanization is real. But we also have devolution, where we have the 47 centers, 47 counties. So some of these people, why don't we encourage some of them to go back to the rural areas? We have plenty of land. That is, if some would accept to go back to their rural areas, would reduce the numbers and also solve the problem of having no children in the rural areas. There is urbanization also in the counties, 47 counties, because of devolution. What is found in Nairobi is also found in the rural areas because of devolution. So why don't we come up with something to encourage our people to go back to the rural areas where there is plenty of land. I know your place, Madam Speaker, and there's a lot of land in your constituency. So if some of these people, not only yours, but also other places, if they can be encouraged, even though there is urbanization, to still do their small businesses and also set up businesses in the rural areas where there is plenty of land and where there is there are more resources than in Nairobi City. So with that, Madam Speaker, I support, and I say let's still keep on talking so that we can bring amendments and ensure that we do not have any children lost, any children discriminated from the basic need, which is basic education. Then to my fellow ODM people, I usually don't talk politics, but let me just say, welcome back home to Azimio, where there is no zoning. Thank you.
The Honorable Carol Omondi, member for Suba.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Actually, let me begin by congratulating Honorable Anthony Oluoch for not just bringing a very innovative bill, but also taking his time to educate us about these up-bed schools. I think one of the greatest iniquities in this country is that our young people do not have equal access or uniform access to educational opportunities. And this has been made worse by the CBE or the CBC system, whichever way you want to call it. Actually, in the informal settlements, quite a large number of people are not able to meet even the basic requirements under that curriculum program. Even the parental involvement that is required is not possible within the framework, social frameworks of the informal settlements. The parents cannot be fully engaged, be present, internet connectivity is not there. So in other words, what is happening there is just perpetuating inequality and denying very many young Kenyans the opportunity to get a proper education. This is a very good bill, and I appreciate the innovation that is involved. I think what is happening with these update schools is just a social problem, a social challenge being addressed by volunteers. So I was discussing with Honorable Anthony that there's one question we probably need to ask, and that is what I'll address myself to. How do we fit the update schools into the framework of public finance management? Because public funds, by our Constitution and Public Finance Management Act, can only be utilized for public investments. Yet, the update schools are not purely public. He explained to me that some are organized by NGOs, some are organized by churches, some are very temporary. Somebody has given part of his shop or something for schools, somebody to conduct schools, volunteers actually, people who probably just get tokens from parents and the rest of it. So he challenged me to apply my mind to how do we, to answer the question that is disturbing me. So Honorable Anthony, the first thing I think, you gave me a very good answer, that the schools must not be for profit. So in other words, we need to create a certain category of publicly funded schools that are not purely public, which will be update schools. But we must give them certain characteristics that will shield them from misuse by private sector or private individuals. So one of the ideas is that such a school must not be for profit. In other words, it must be a school established for social investment. And I think if we are clear on that, then we can find a way of getting public funds to do infrastructure, even books, even to support teachers by way of capitation. Secondly, I think the ownership structure should be limited to community or faith-based trusts. There must be institutions that are then owned by groups that are organized around a trust system, so that the public element is secured. And I also think we must give them some permanency. They should not be institutions that exist this year and then disappear the next year. So the trusts must be in perpetuity, and I think we need to have a framework. I'm sure we can find some housing for them under the law of trusts, so that the communities around the informal settlements where they are built have a way of owning them. I also think we need to have some way of ensuring that there's public oversight of their management of these schools. I saw in the bill there's county education boards to oversight and manage them. I think if we can work around all these issues and answer the question of their ownership and give them the public character or semi-public character, then we can get around the challenges of the Constitution and the PFM Act. With those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I really support, and I think we will continue to work together with Honorable Oluoch on trying to get how to really give them the right character that fits within the public finance sector management framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable Leo Njeru, member for Mbeere North, Wamudende.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this very important bill on the Basic Education Amendment Bill, and to congratulate Honorable Tom Oluoch for coming up with this much needed bill. Indeed, as most members have pointed out, education is the main equalizer. Actually, if you look at poverty and lack of access to education and infrastructure, that creates a vicious circle where poverty leads to lack of access to education, and this creates a self-perpetuating cycle. So the government has to be very deliberate to break this cycle so that we stop this generational transmission of poverty. So these very disadvantaged children, they also have to be funded. You know, they also need good teachers, because it's no point talking of a nation where we have quality education or access or rights to basic education, and yet some children, our own children in the slum areas, they can't access good education. So I want to support and say that while a lot has been added, and I believe Mheshimiwa is noting, the regulation, because again, we might tend to, I mean, these centers, most of them tend to be private. So I think the main issue is now to ensure that when government is funding, this is not taken advantage of by some unscrupulous business people who now register their institutions as updates and benefit from teachers and funding. So it's really a good bill, and I believe we are going to continue supporting it to ensure that these children in the slum areas and in less advantaged areas get quality education, get teachers, because we cannot justify today as a nation having an area where some students, some children actually do not have teachers, where parents have to sometimes ask who can teach this, who can teach one subject or another, and that is not quality education. And like has been insisted here, we have to break this self-perpetuating cycle so that we don't have a case where low income restricts access to quality education. Now this leads to fewer jobs opportunities, leading again to financial hardships, and leading again to poverty, which means that children in these areas will be in an ending poverty trap, which can only be ended by education, which now I believe with this bill is going to be addressed. I support this very important bill, and I believe with more input, it's going to ensure that it's not taken advantage of, and a clear definition of these alternative basic education training centers will be put in place. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Rueda Obo, member for Lamu East.
Asante Bi Speaker. Nami mwanzo ni mshukuru Mheshimiwa Anthony Aloch kwa kuleta marekebisho haya ya katiba ya sheria. Kule kwangu matatizo haya hakuna, lakini iko matatizo ambayo yamefanana na haya, na ikibidi kama nitabidi na mimi niweke marekebisho kidogo, kwa sababu shida yetu sana kule la mashariki ni ile registration, ili wapate ile pesa ya serikali kuu, ile inaitwa capitation. Kwangu utapata shule kama Kiunga, shule ya Kiunga Primary. Ile shule wanafunzi ni wengi, lakini pesa inayoenda ni kidogo kwa sababu hawana birth certificate. Kutoka Kiunga mpaka kuja kupata birth certificate inagharimu 8,400. Ni Lamu Mashariki peke yake unapata kama matatizo hao ya birth.
Order, member for Lamu East. Honorable members, the honorable member for Lamu East will have a balance of 9 minutes when this motion is scheduled.
by the House Business Committee. Honorable members, and the time now being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, 8th of April 2026 at 2:30 p.m.